The wind slammed against the shutters as if trying to claw its way inside, rattling the windows hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. Elijah Boone paused with his hand above the lantern, listening. The night outside had gone strangely still between gusts. No crickets, no cattle murmuring, not even the distant hum of the creek. It was the kind of silence that felt carved, deliberate, waiting for something to break it. Then came a knocking. Sharp, desperate, barely holding its own against the rising moan of the winter wind. Elijah crossed the room in 3 strides and swung open the door. A young woman collapsed into his arms, her breath ragged, her clothes ripped by brush and panic. Dust streaked her face, and her fingers were trembling so violently she could barely keep hold of the doorframe. Her eyes, wide, frantic, searching, fixed on the darkness behind her as though something out there still hunted her. "They're coming," she gasped, the words breaking apart in the cold. Elijah guided her inside with a firmness born from habit, not curiosity. He shut the door and barred it, the wood thudding into place just as another cold gust rushed across the porch. He could feel the chill through the floorboards, feel the night pressing close, listening. The girl staggered toward the fire, reaching her hands toward the flames. Elijah tossed a blanket around her shoulders and crouched beside her. Her teeth chattered, but her eyes, those storm-tossed eyes, kept darting toward the window, following sounds only she seemed able to hear. "What happened?" Elijah asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "Dust, water, the saloon, my father." Her breath hitched as though the memory cut her lungs in two. "Rafe Mallory. I saw him kill a man. My father. Shot him like he was nothing." She wiped at her face, smearing grit across her cheek. "They saw me. They're hunting me." Elijah's gaze shifted toward the door, though his expression didn't change. Outside, the wind surged again, rolling across the plains like a warning. He could hear something else beneath it, something faint, far away, but unmistakable. A horse. Then another. The girl flinched at the sound, clutching the blanket closer. Elijah rose slowly. Something old stirred behind his eyes, something sharp-edged and familiar. He moved around the small room without hurry, snuffing the lanterns one by one until only the fire remained, flickering low against the logs. The shadows deepened. The silence thickened. "You're safe here," he said. But the way he said it, calm, steady, without doubt, felt heavier than the words themselves, as though he wasn't offering reassurance at all, but making a promise he'd keep at any cost. Another distant hoofbeat cracked the air. The girl's breath caught. Elijah didn't reach for fear. He reached for the coat on the wall, old, worn, stitched heavy, and shrugged it over his shoulders with the slow certainty of a man stepping back into something he'd sworn he'd left behind. The fire bent low in the wind. The desert exhaled a colder breath. And far off, 3 riders crested the ridge, their torches burning like eyes in the dark. The frost glittered like broken glass across the yard as Elijah pressed his palm to the window, watching the ridge. The torches he'd seen earlier had vanished into the dark, but the desert was holding its breath again, too still, too intent. Even the cattle in the distant pens stood rigid, ears pointed toward the hills. Behind him, Clara paced in front of the fire, her blanket slipping from her shoulders as she wrung her hands. "They're close. I know they're close." Her voice trembled like the lantern flame beside her. Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he blew out the lantern, letting the room fall deeper into shadow. The only light came from the embers, pulsing faintly across the walls like a heartbeat. He moved with quiet purpose, checking the shotgun, then the pistol, each motion precise, practiced, too practiced for a simple rancher. Clara watched him closely. "You act like you've done this before." Elijah slipped another round into the shotgun. "Once." The word landed heavy, final. A sudden whistle cut through the pre-dawn air, long, sharp, carried by the wind from the northern ridge. Clara flinched as though struck. Elijah didn't blink. Another whistle answered, then a third. Signals. Clara backed away from the window, shaking her head. 3 riders. There were 3 of them when I ran. They'll fan out. They'll look for tracks. Elijah grabbed his coat, thick with dust and past storms, and stepped onto the porch. Frost crackled beneath his boots. The horizon was still darkness, but a thin line of gray teased the edge, coming dawn. He scanned the ground. The girl's footprints trailed from the sagebrush straight to his door, stamped deep and easy to follow. He knelt, brushing the frost lightly with his fingers, then erased the nearest prints with slow, deliberate sweeps of his hand. "Come here," he said quietly. Clara hovered at the doorway, hesitant but obeying. Elijah pointed to the tracks. "You ran hard. They'll find these." Her breathing quickened. "But they won't get past the ridge before daylight." Clara's eyes widened. "How do you know?" Elijah didn't reply. He stood, the cold settling over him like an old coat he remembered too well. The faintest echo of hooves drifted across the mesa. Clara turned toward the sound, fear rising sharp in her throat. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Elijah's jaw tightened, shadowed by the first hint of dawn. "Because someone once helped me when no one else would. Because I didn't arrive in time to save the ones who needed me most." Clara's breath caught. Her gaze dropped to the floor, and that was when she saw it. The scar slicing across his shoulder. A wound that looked carved by a bullet's fire. Something she had missed earlier, hidden beneath cloth and quiet. Her eyes lifted slowly to the trunk beneath his bed, its metal bindings catching a sliver of firelight. Heavy, locked, waiting. Outside, the whistle sounded again, closer, determined. Elijah stepped back inside, shut the door, and reached for the key he hadn't touched in years. The desert waited, the ridge watched, and the wind carried the faint echo of hooves drawing nearer. Gunfire cracked against the porch rail, splintering wood inches from Elijah's hand. Clara ducked behind the hearthstones, her breath sharp, eyes wide with the flare of each muzzle flash outside. Elijah stepped into the doorway without hesitation. The rising sun bled over the ridge, turning the fog into shifting gold. Through it, 3 silhouettes moved. Rafe Mallory at the front, his wolf fur coat trailing like a shadow, the 2 remaining riders flanking him with rifles raised. Mallory's voice tore through the cold. "Boone," hand over the girl. "You ain't got business in this." Elijah didn't answer. His gaze never left Mallory, calm as stone, unreadable. The duster coat he wore stirred slightly in the wind, its weight familiar again, settling over him like something that had been waiting in the dark all these years. Mallory sneered. "Suit yourself." The riders spurred forward. Elijah moved before the fog fully shook from their horses' hooves. One step off the porch, silent, precise. The sun caught the iron of his revolver as it cleared the holster in a motion too smooth for any rancher. One shot. A rider dropped from his saddle before Clara could blink, thudding into the frost. Another shot. The second rider spun sideways, rifle flying from his hands as he crashed against the fence post. Mallory jerked back in shock, reins twisting in his fist. "No, you're dead. You're supposed to be dead." Elijah walked toward him, each step steady, deliberate, as if he'd heard those words before from dying men. Clara leaned out from her hiding place, staring at him with realization dawning slow and heavy. The man she'd met last night, the quiet widower with gentle hands, had vanished like smoke. In his place stood something colder, faster, etched by loss. Mallory fired wildly. The bullets chewed dirt at Elijah's feet, tore chips from the trough. Elijah didn't break stride. He flowed sideways, lifted his gun. Light flashed. Mallory's pistol flew from his grip, skittering across the ground. His horse reared, nearly throwing him. "Buckthorn," Mallory breathed, horror twisting his face. "You're Eli Buckthorn." Clara's breath halted. The name hung in the air like a dragged coffin. Mallory slid off his saddle, stumbling backward. "You died in Abilene." Every outlaw heard it. Elijah's expression didn't shift. Should have stayed believing it. Mallory retreated toward the rocks, hands trembling. Elijah followed, boots crushing frost, revolver unwavering. Clara watched from the porch, heart pounding as the truth unfolded with every step he took. He wasn't fighting like a man defending his land. He was hunting. Another shot echoed. Mallory's last rider trying to rise before Eli put him down cleanly. The air shuddered with the finality of it. Mallory was alone now, breath steaming, cornered against the ridge wall. Clara looked at Elijah's silhouette against the morning sun, broad, unyielding, ghost-like, and felt a chill ripple through her. The rancher was gone. Across the desert, a legend had risen in his place. He lunged from the shadow of the ridge with a roar, slamming into Elijah and driving both men into the dust. Their boots carved trenches in the frost as they grappled, Mallory swinging wild, desperate blows. Elijah caught one across the jaw, hard enough to snap his head sideways, but he didn't fall. He planted his feet and pushed back, forcing Mallory off balance. The outlaw clawed for a knife at his belt. Elijah caught his wrist. The blade flashed between them, trembling inches from his throat. Mallory snarled, spit flying. "You ain't talking me like one of your warrants, Marshal." Another shove, another surge of strength, but this time Mallory's momentum won. He slammed Elijah against a boulder, knocking the breath from his lungs. The knife lifted again, tip glinting in the harsh noon light. That was when Clara screamed. The sound tore through the canyon like a warning shot. Mallory whipped his head toward her, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Elijah drove his shoulder forward, knocking Mallory's arm wide. The knife scraped stone with a screech. Elijah moved fast. He seized Mallory's wrist, twisted, and sent the blade spinning across the dust. Mallory stumbled back, panting, blood on his lip. He reached for Elijah's fallen revolver lying near the boulder. Clara stepped forward, hands trembling but defiant. "Stop." Mallory glanced her way, sneering. "Get back, girl. You ain't bold enough to." Elijah's shadow crossed him. Before he could turn, Elijah struck one brutal, final blow that dropped the outlaw to his knees. Mallory wavered, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed face first into the dirt, the ridge echoing the impact like a closing chapter. For a long moment, nothing moved. Only the wind stirred, lifting pale dust around Elijah's boots. Clara approached slowly, her breath unsteady. Is it over?" Elijah wiped the blood from his knuckles and looked toward the horizon, where the last of the dust was settling. "It is now." She studied him. Not the legend whispered by outlaws, not the marshal carved in old tales, but the man standing here, shoulders slumped under grief and memory. "You didn't have to do all this for me," she said softly. Elijah holstered his gun, each motion careful, almost reverent. "I couldn't save my family," he murmured, "but I could save you." Clara's lip trembled. "You already did." The sun climbed higher, bleaching the desert pale. The ridge stretched silent and endless, holding the weight of what had been settled. Elijah offered her his coat. "You'll head back to town at first light. Sheriff will see you safe." "And you?" Clara asked. Elijah looked toward his lonely ranch, standing sturdy against the wind. "I'll stay. There's peace here. And folks know now, evil don't ride this ridge anymore." As they walked back through the thinning frost, Clara glanced over her shoulder. Elijah was already turning toward the porch, the duster coat trailing behind him like a forgotten shadow reclaimed. Later, travelers would swear they'd seen him there, a lone figure on the ridge, watching the frontier with quiet, unbreakable resolve. A rancher who offered more than shelter. A ghost who became a legend.